triple boosting people, bunch of satanic, chimeric parasite injecting, snake venom peptide eugenicist.
How many adjectives was that to describe people that you don't like? People who are to the left of hunting the homeless for sport. My God, dude, this guy is a problem. If you're unfamiliar, this is Pete Santilli. He is a far-right conspiracy theorist with a talk show on Rumble and Telegram and a bunch of other different places. He's got his own podcast and stuff like that. Absolutely nutty, some of the stuff he believes. So I want to talk about some of his ideas, some of his beliefs, and where his rhetoric seems to be going right now, because it's getting kind of concerning. This is from early August 2021. This is a conversation that Pete Santilli had with former congressional candidate, I think, or maybe she was a member of Congress. I don't remember if she ever succeeded or not. She's not a member of Congress now, but this is Deanna Lorraine on the right. He had a conversation with Deanna Lorraine. She was also a correspondent for InfoWars at one point. Yeah, check this out. Listen to what he had to say here.
The people now that are learning more about the adverse impact of getting vaccinated.
There was no adverse impact of getting vaccinated. He lives in a conspiracy land.
They're having regrets about it because we're hearing about this shedding that's going on, and
the vaccine shedding.
The shedding and
no, completely false. There are vaccines out there that are capable of what he's referring to as shedding. I forget exactly where this happened. Some African country, I believe, received a bunch of polio vaccines, right? But they weren't like the shots. They were the oral kind that you drink it. Vaccines can be created in a number of ways. One of the ways in which they're created is by deactivating or truncating the active part of the virus off. Like, the virus is seemingly a living organism that kind of crawls around and does its thing, although there's debate about whether or not it's alive. But it crawls around and gets into places and does its thing. That's what viruses do. So you can kill the virus. That's one way of doing it. Or you can, cut the DNA part off of the virus and put that in an oral solution for people to drink. Years ago, there was a polio vaccine that wasn't completely deactivated. It wasn't completely killed or truncated or something. And they gave it to some people, and they shed the virus. It made a lot of people sick. You have to make sure you're getting high-quality, tested, lab-created vaccines, without a shadow of a doubt. So in those cases, shedding is possible, but not with this specific vaccine, not with the mRNA COVID vaccine. Shedding does not happen like that. So he's just making things up.
And also, the activation of the graphene oxide is actually sitting there dormant, but if it gets energized by something like 5G.
Oh, wow. He's mixing a bunch of conspiracies together. There's no graphene oxide in the COVID vaccine. Never was. Completely made up, of course. And what does he mean activated by 5G? Okay, I have 5G on my phone. I have for like a year. 5G's been around for like ever, first of all. And second, what effect is 5G supposed to have on graphene oxide? And third, graphene oxide's not in the vaccine. Like, what's he talking about? Literally, every step of his belief system, every assertion that he just made was false. Every one of them. Every premise that he just built this off of is wrong.
It actually kills all the cells around it. That is so crazy to me.
If you hear something that's crazy to you, if you hear some idea that makes you think, that's weird, right? Maybe you should rethink. Maybe you should research it and look it up and see if that's actually real or if that really is just crazy. Never crossed his head. Guy decided just to go straight to Crazy Town, skip all the stops, and assume that all of this stuff is true without researching it one bit. Now, he's probably one of those people that did his own research, right?
Can you imagine if they just activate and said, all right, 1 million people are going to be gone, just by energizing the graphene oxide.
Dude, I love it. When did this video come out? This is like August 2021, right? Yeah, August 2021. And here we sit. Years later. Okay, this never happened. 5G was active when this video came out. And this never happened. They're shameless, man. This guy is absolutely shameless.
Gone, just by energizing the graphene oxide.
And that's the thing. People don't really know exactly what's in it. You know, those people.
No, we know what's in it. We know exactly what's in the vaccine. We knew exactly what was in it before. We don't know the exact process that they use to produce it because that would be protected by intellectual property. You can debate about whether or not that, we should know exactly what the process is for the greater good, but we know what's in it. We have to know for allergy purposes. Of course we know what's in it.
People, Biden, even Trump, any of these representatives, they're not taking the real vaccine live on TV when they pretend that they do. You know that they're not that stupid. They're not doing that. They're leaving us to do that.
Why would they lie about that? This makes no sense at all. So anyway, that's Pete Santilli. We just want to give you a little primer on who the guy is before we really enter crazy town with him. Check this one out. Early February 2023, reasonably new episode. Listen to what he had to say. He's still on this vaccine thing.
Filthy Pfizer Satanists, okay?
Okay.
Triple boosting people, bunch of satanic, chimeric parasite injecting, snake venom peptide eugenicist.
Dude, I feel like every word that he just picked out has some fractal meaning among the MAGA nutbags, right? Like, what were all of those words? Some peptide, parasite, something or other? Like, what do all those mean? I know what some of them mean. When he said parasite, I know that there's a real movement within MAGA circles of people who believe that you're basically injecting a synthetic parasite, like an actual synthetic egg that hatches into like a mechanical parasite that like leaches your something, blah, 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 I don't even know from there. Every one of those words was very specifically and intentionally chosen. I just don't know what they all meant. That's crazy.
Injecting snake venom peptide eugenicist, disgusting people. It's time. You know what we need to do?
Uh-oh. He's about to go off the rails, isn't he?
Pfizer is just a manufacturing plant for Satan, okay? We need to shut that friggin' place down. Shut it down. Destroy Pfizer now. Do it now.
Okay, now what we're listening to at this point is something called stochastic terrorism. Stochastic terrorism is the idea that you can demonize somebody or something from a public platform to the point that the listening audience is statistically likely, at least one of them in the audience, is statistically likely to be crazy enough to do something, to follow your instructions. I mean, how many people are listening to Pete? I think he has 100,000 subbies on Rumble or somewhere in there. He's got even more than that on Telegram, I think. That's not little. That's pretty big. Statistically, say 1% of those 100,000 people that follow him or listen to him say this just now or whatever are crazy enough. They got some kind of a condition that makes them more willing to do something absolutely unhinged like that. And of that 1%, a further 1% have the means to do it, the weapons that would be required, and the car to transport them to these locations. Statistically speaking, at least a few, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 people have the means, the motive, and the opportunity to do something absolutely unhinged when he says something like this. That is stochastic terrorism. And that seems to be the MO of the MAGA movement right now. Keep listening because it gets worse. He just said shut it down. Somebody shut it down, right? That was tame compared to what he's about to say.
Destroy Pfizer now. Do it now. Do it now. Go over the wall, get into their freaking buildings, unplug all their freaking equipment. Let's go. It's time to storm the Bastille, is it not? Huh?
This woman is just like, she's giving absolutely no feedback here. I love it.
Oh, that's illegal. Really? They're killing people and bragging about it and sponsoring this freaking crap right here.
Okay, this is a different story I'll tell you about in a second. But this is what happens when people get all wrapped up in a conspiracy. This right here. They are willing to go to disturbing lengths, deeply disturbing lengths, to stop some perceived injustice, even if that injustice is completely fabricated. But let's step back. Listen to what he said again real quick.
and sponsoring this freaking crap right here.
So this, what he's referring to, this is the Grammy performance. Apparently there's a song called Unholy that was performed at the Grammys. It was just some people expressing themselves artistically. That's it, at the Grammys. Who cares, right? And on top of that, Pfizer was a sponsor there. So at a commercial break, they said, this is sponsored by Pfizer or whatever. And they, of course, believe that Satan and Pfizer are the two most evil things in the entire universe. So it was like one conspiracy built on top of another with this guy. He's convinced that there's some cabal out there trying to pull strings like puppet masters and cause problems for everybody.
Here, they should be shut down for sponsoring this level of Satanism that should never occur here on Earth.
Dude, what happened to freedom? What happened to everyone's right to express themselves freely? What happened to that? You know what happened to it, really? It never existed. They never believed in that. There's a guy named Richard Spencer. You may have heard of him. A while back, he got pretty famous. He's a Nazi. I think he claims credit for starting the alt-right movement. I don't know if that's even true or not, but he went on a show back in 2018, late May 2018, to talk to this guy about free speech and how he feels about it. Remember, this guy, at least at this time, was a massive representative for the right.
But as far as government regulation, I mean, yes, I think in the short term we would favor government regulation of speech, but long term, are we even pro free speech?
No, of course not. But we have to use this platform in order.
So we're being radically honest here. And,
yes,
yeah.
radically pragmatic. Yes.
They were never in favor of free speech, the people on the right. Now, this is just one more example of it. They were never in favor of free speech. You don't protect free speech so you can talk about apple pie. If you don't protect speech you disagree with, if you don't defend free speech you don't like, you don't like free speech at all. And here we sit listening to this guy call his audience to arms to do something about these people using their right to free speech, their First Amendment right. What happened to these supposed constitutionalists, these supposed free speech absolutists? What happened to them? The idea went right out the window the moment it was convenient.
Here on Earth. Pfizer corporatism must be destroyed. Must be destroyed.
This escalation in rhetoric, of extreme rhetoric like this, it's not really new. You know, it's been escalating like this for a while. In fact, it's been at this point for a while, right? But it's disturbing to see for a litany of reasons. Let's talk about some of them. Let's talk about why this is so disturbing that we're at this point right now. Now, before we get there, let me just put this on record. I don't think that things are going to fall apart in the United States. I don't think that this is going to descend into a civil war. I do, however, think that we need to talk about it. We need to draw attention to it when people say and do things like this. If we can draw attention to this and make people aware of what's happening right now on the right and how absolutely unhinged things are getting, I think people will step in and say, stop Trump from winning an election, like what happened in 2020. I think voters will turn out and prevent these people from taking positions of authority. I think people in positions of authority will prevent conspiracy theories from spreading like wildfire, at least kill the virality of the conspiracy theories, as long as we're aware that this situation is happening in society. I think things will go the way that they need to go over time. We just need to keep chugging along, keep fighting, keep moving, keep doing what we can do to make the situation better. So I don't want this to be like a defeatist, like a doom-scrolling type of situation. I don't even view it that way. I just think we need to draw attention to it is all. This one's from mid-September 2022, and I have to play this for you to give you an idea of my position on this situation, on the fact that people like Pete Santilli on the right are repeating this type of stuff, are actually calling for this type of thing. Here's another example of a guy on the right. John Zimmerack is his name, I believe. Incredibly influential person, by the way. He's not just some lone nut. He's actually well known on the right. This is a sample of what he seems to believe is happening in America right now.
When the Nazis attacked Jewish stores and got away with it, that told people persecution, real genocidal persecution, is down the road. Right now in America, our government and the leftist institutions that support it, from the Ivy League to large numbers of churches, to the mainstream of the Republican Party, which supports it by being afraid to fight it, it's reminding me of the buildup in the 1990s in Rwanda, the buildup towards genocide. The Hutus were the majority, but they weren't as wealthy or successful as the minority Tutsis. So they resented them. They wanted their stuff. They wanted their power. They wanted their money. And they started demonizing the Tutsis, calling them cockroaches on radio shows.
Okay, it's really fascinating to hear him characterize the situation this way. If you're not familiar with the thing that happened in Rwanda, the way that it all played out, let me just kind of give you a breakdown of how it actually happened, because he's not characterizing it correctly at all. Back in the early to mid 1900s, I believe, Britain colonized Rwanda. It's a country in Africa, right? When they came to Rwanda, they discovered that there were multiple tribes. There was the Hutu tribe, there was the Tutsi tribe, not the Tutsi tribe, but the Tutsi tribe. And then there was another one, the Iwa tribe, maybe? I don't remember. The other tribe, the third one, though, I think they're hunter-gatherers, so they were totally, out of the fray or out of the mix in this situation, and not really relevant for the story I'm about to tell. The Hutus and the Tutsis were effectively exactly the same for all intents and purposes. The differences were negligible. But when the British colonists came to Rwanda, they noticed that some of the Tutsi tribe were slightly taller and maybe a little bit lighter skinned than the Hutu, just by a little bit. Almost impossible to tell the differences between the two, honestly. So the British, thinking that, the Tutsi tribe looked more like them than the Hutu did, gave them positions of authority. They put them in positions of government. They allowed them to run things, to be the bosses, effectively, over the Hutu. They created a second-class citizen out of the Hutus, out of the Hutu tribe. And they created ID cards that listed your tribe, Hutu or Tutsi. You weren't allowed to do certain things. You weren't allowed to go certain places. You weren't allowed any kind of position of authority or importance. You made almost nothing. You were an underclass as a Hutu back in the 1900s. That's how it worked. Eventually, the Hutu, being, I believe, the majority, they were like 90% to the Tutsis' 10%. The Hutu were the majority, but they were terribly mistreated. They were treated as second-class citizens. It came to the point where there was a lot of stochastic terrorism taking place. They were, he's correct, they were calling them cockroaches and stuff like that. Until one day the call went out to cut the tall trees. That's the saying, cut the tall trees. And that was the phrase, that was the code word or the code phrase needed to signal the beginning of a full-blown genocide against the Tutsi tribe. It was bad. It was as bad as what happened in Germany in World War II. And what made it even worse is that every single one of them had an ID card, had a driver's license with their tribe and their address on it. So when the Hutu stormed the Capitol buildings and gained access to the records, they had a list of every Tutsi tribe member's address, and they went house to house searching for them and taking them out. It was deeply ugly. It lasted for 100 days. 100 days. and nobody in the world said a word. Complete silence. The world looked on while they went house to house and took them out one after another. I think Belgium may have been in charge by the time the attack started. I think the British colony fell and then Belgium took over, something like. I don't remember exactly how it played out, but the point stands. Eventually, the Tutsi tribe escaped, or some of them did, formed a militia and went through the country, regaining control and establishing order. Do you know the name of the group that they formed, the Tutsi tribe? They called it the Rwandan Patriotic Front. The Rwandan Patriotic Front. Does that name sound familiar to you? Remember these guys right here, early December 2021? They went marching through the Capitol. This was Patriot Front, is the name of this group. And they believe that they are obligated to retake the country in the name of the white race or something like that. Absolutely nuts, man. These people basically modeled their organization, their goals, their interests, their plans, even their name after what happened in Rwanda. And here is a video of them actually training for and preparing for war in 2021.
Hey, rear guard, stagger. Hey, what are you doing? Hey, don't let him in. You're staggering, guys.
I mean, this is the type of thing that we're dealing with right now. You know, the people on the right, I'd venture as far as to say the people on the far right. It's not everybody on the right. But there is a real contingent on the right of nutterbutters who seem to think that the white race or whatever is about to be attacked just like the Tutsis were. I mean, you heard what the guy said, John Zimmerak, what he was saying about the Tutsis? Listen to his characterization of this one more time, now that you have the full background to, like, the context to understand what was happening.
Build up in the 1990s in Rwanda, the build up towards genocide. The Hutus were the majority, but they weren't as wealthy or successful as the minority Tutsis. So they resented them. They wanted their stuff. They wanted their power. They wanted
that. No to all of that. Like, be fair about this situation. They were sick of being second-class citizens. They were unfairly placed on the bottom rung of society and not allowed to move up because the Tutsis supposedly looked more like white Europeans than the Hutus did. He obviously identifies himself with the Tutsi race, right, in this situation, and believes himself to be a victim.
Their money, and they started demonizing the Tutsis, calling them cockroaches on radio shows.
There was a lot of stochastic terrorism, but again, where do you hear the stochastic terrorism coming from? This video that I'm making right now, it started with Pete Santilli demonizing Pfizer and calling for some absolutely unhinged stuff, you remember? Where is this type of language actually coming from? I haven't heard a word of stuff like this from anybody on the left. Maybe there's some lone nutterbutter out there saying this crazy stuff, but no people in positions of authority or power are saying this on the left. John Zimmerak is in a position of authority and power. Pete Santilli is in a position of authority. People listen to them. They're public influencers. They're public figures. And they are actually calling for this stuff. He has the roles reversed, is really the problem here. He is pushing us further down the road that the Rwandans went down originally. Now, like I said, I don't think that's going to happen. I seriously, deeply doubt that's going to happen to the bottom of my heart. But he's reaching for it. He's pushing it there. He's doing everything he can. And he has somehow placed himself in the opposite position because he has a persecution complex. He believes that he's the one being persecuted.
News hosts would refer to Tutsi cockroaches. The way I see people talking about white people, about Christians, about so-called Christian nationalists.
What people? Who? Tell me specifically. Give me names. What specific people have you heard talking that way about white people, Christians, or whoever else? This is completely made up, fabricated right out of the ether. This is not happening.
They talk about us the same way.
We're not making this up.
Yes, they are.
If you ignore this now, you become part of the problem. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. This is really wicked. I want to be honest. I want to be clear. This is really wicked. John is not exaggerating about this.
Yes, he is. These people are unhinged from reality, man. Absolutely unhinged from reality. And unfortunately, they're not nobodies. I'm not doing the old nut picking thing here, where I pick somebody out who has no platform at all. Just some lone nutcase on Twitter with 3 followers. That's not what I'm doing. These people have massive public platforms. The weirdest thing is I don't even think they believe that they're the ones being targeted. Just listen to what Zimarak said to Eric Metaxas like a month earlier. Listen to this.
This is spiritual warfare, and we are now in the Normandy landing of spiritual warfare. The Democratic Party is possessed by preternatural evil. It is not a human institution anymore. It is an instrument of wicked spirits.
I mean, any of this sounding familiar? How can he possibly sit there with a straight face and say he's the persecuted one, and within the month say this stuff?
Spirits. This is demonic. Our enemies are demonic.
Really? With a straight face, he's saying this. And then claiming to be a victim, claiming that everybody else is after him as he says these words. That is unhinged. These people are not nobodies. They appear in stadiums full of tens of thousands of people. Eric Metaxas, specifically, this guy, that's whose show John Zimarak was on. They're not nobodies. Pete Santilli is not a nobody. And he is out here calling for some absolutely disturbing stuff right now. I don't know, let me know what you think about it in the comments. I think this is absolutely nutty.